I think it's important for all citizens to care about the schools, because those people are going to be on the street. They're going to be turning over your table when you're trying to have a meal at a restaurant. They're going to be blocking the road. They're going to be tearing down a statue of, Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. These people are out of control. They're violent and they're dangerous.
When times get tough, you need to get proud. No need to look backward, put your feet on the ground. Stand up, stand up.
Welcome to The Fallen State. I am Jesse Lee Peterson. Don't forget that The Fallen State is on Patreon. Click the Patreon link in the description to support our work. And in advance, thank you. A very interesting guest today. I have with me Dr. Mary Grabar. She is a resident fellow at the Alexander Hamilton Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. She's also the author of Debunking Howard Zinn and Debunking the 1619 Project. I totally appreciate that. Dr. Grabar, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
And I'm really glad to have you here. A lot of this Howard Zinn and all that, I never heard of these people. I might be like a lot of the younger generation. They don't really understand what's being taught to them either. So thank you again for coming on. So your parents were born under communism, right?
Correct, and so was I.
And where and how old were you when you left that area? I read that you were a young person.
Yeah, I was only 2 years old when my parents came here. So I was born in Slovenia when it was still part of communist Yugoslavia. And my parents had to escape over the border, and they stayed in a refugee camp in Austria for 9 months. And then my uncle, my father's older brother, sponsored us, and they brought us over, and I grew up in Rochester, New York.
Amazing. And so as a young girl, young child like that, you were not personally affected by communism, right?
Well, no. I mean, I remember going there for an extended visit when I was 12 years old with my family, but I grew up with the sense of communism being very bad because I heard my parents and relatives and their friends talking about what it was like.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Do you remember some of the examples of what they said about it?
Oh, yeah. Well, communists tell you how much food you can grow. So if you are a poor peasant farmer, as my relatives were, and when I went back in 1969, none of them had indoor plumbing or cars, things that I had taken for granted.
Right.
So when you live under communist rule and, you have a few acres to farm and to live on, what they will do is they will send inspectors around. And as my aunt told me, they would come out to a field of wheat or something, and they would find the lushest little patch and say, okay, you owe this percentage of it. And then they would say, each family can only raise one hog for slaughter.
Wow.
And if you don't have enough to eat, well, what do you think they did? They were doing hog slaughtering in the middle of the night when the inspectors weren't around because, they make a lot of noise and they can tell. So you have to do all those kinds of things in order to survive. I mean, can you imagine a government telling you how much, if you're a farmer, how much food you can raise, or if not, how much you can buy to feed your family? I mean, that's what it boils down to.
That's amazing. And so you say you went over there, you went back to visit. I would think that if a country is a controlled country like that, communist country, wouldn't you be concerned that they would not let you out if you go for a visit? They wouldn't let you leave?
Yeah, under Tito, Yugoslavia was, not like, the other Eastern Bloc countries.
Oh, okay.
They were a little more open. He actually, had ties to the West. So it wasn't quite as bad as the other communist countries, but you had to get the visa and all that. And, I'm sure they were tracking us and
Yeah.
made sure they knew where we were. And when I was there, I remember my father trying to talk to his brother-in-law, my uncle, and ask about what things were like politically. And my uncle was afraid to say it. And this was in his own house. He was like, I don't want to talk about that. I just don't ask me about it.
That's amazing. And so was it always communist where your parents grew up, or did they allow it to become that way?
Well, it was during World War II. It was one of the countries that, fell under communism, after World War II.
Right.
So, there's a whole long story there. And, and I think, Americans can take a lesson from it because, I've read about it. And what they did is they set people against each other. They set brother against brother. They had the communists, they were called the partisans, and they were coming into the villages. And they were using the divide and conquer strategy. And, we could see that happening here in America.
I'm thinking the same thing, and I want to get to that as we move forward. It's amazing to see in America how they are dividing the people, and the people don't seem to see that is happening. They're going right along with it. And I never thought that I would see that in America, but I want to get to that as we move forward here. And so did that cause you to say one day, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to go to school, and I'm going to fight against communism? Was that part of your thinking while growing up?
Well, not really. I kind of took things for granted, that I would have freedom of movement. I mean, who could have thought back in the 70s and 80s that we would be forced to wear masks and show our papers in certain cities before we had a meal and have, vaccines forced on us. So I took that for granted. And after an absence from college, I went back to graduate school and I earned a PhD in English. And that's when I really started seeing this suppression of free thought was in academia. And that's what made me a conservative, was going to graduate school.
So,
and I could...
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I could see these Marxist ideas filtering in, even in, as we were studying literature. And, it aroused my curiosity because I'd always thought, well, communism, that's the old country.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We left that. We are the land of the free, and I can go wherever I want. I can do whatever I, want, as long as I follow the law, and I will be rewarded if I put in the work, with a job or with a degree.
Right.
And, being in the graduate seminar, made me see how the Marxists were really seeping in through the culture, corrupting academia and corrupting education. And here we are, 2022, and it's just exploded.
Yeah, it's amazing. Are your parents still living?
No, they've both passed away.
Do you have family members in this country who are now still living, and they grew up in that environment, communism?
No, I have a slightly older cousin, but he was like 6 years old when.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because I wonder what they're thinking. They ran from a communist country, and they see America becoming that way. Oh, every day you see a glimpse of it. For you, what is that like, seeing that coming, and there is nowhere else to go, because once America become that way, it's done, right? What is it like for you seeing that happening?
It's very alarming to me. Like, as Lincoln said, and then Reagan quoted him, we are the last best hope.
Yeah.
Where are people going to run to? My parents, went in the middle of the night, crossed the border. They ran across the border. My aunt and uncle escaped literally across the border, dropped their farm implements in the field and had nothing, absolutely nothing, and walked over the border to Austria. And there was a place to go to. And my relatives have always appreciated the freedoms and the opportunities that are offered here. They didn't have it easy, but if you were willing to work hard, you could get ahead. And it's alarming. I have a correspondent who's Slovenian, and he's in academia, and he sees what's going on. It's just, it really is alarming to see such a big switch in my lifetime.
Does it, to you and your uncle, does it seem that we can going to turn it around in America and prevent this from happening? Or does it seem like it's going to happen no matter what?
Well, I'm always hopeful, and
Yeah.
I always, I can't help myself. I try to do what I can. What I am, grateful for about is the fact that we're getting grassroots movements.
Yeah.
So back, under the Obama administration, under Common Core, which is sort of where I saw this starting, I was speaking out. I was speaking to tea parties, and I was trying to encourage, people who were retired or people had kids in schools, like, call your legislator, become active, try to get people into office. Look, here, I got this email on the English department's listserv calling for a Marxist conference at a state school. This was in Georgia. I was living in Georgia. And people were like, yeah, that's disturbing, but, that's in, college, and we're in the business world, and we're going to advise our kids to take engineering or medicine or, business,
Right.
and we're just going to avoid that. Well, look at it now.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
But the election in Virginia, I hope that's a good signal.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
How many years have you been in higher education?
Well, I went back to school in 92 part-time, and took me almost 10 years to get my PhD. And then I worked as an instructor, which was a semester to 2-semester contract from about 2003 to 2013. And I got canceled from a couple places. They just said they had no classes for me the next semester. And this was after I'd have a couple op-eds published. And the last place I taught was at Emory University, but that was a program that had private funding. So I wasn't really an employee of Emory, but I was teaching there, and that ran out.
Amazing. So when you enter into your field, were you surprised? What was your first impression of so many liberals being in that? What was it for you?
Well, I was fortunate because my first semester, I had a professor who was the classic old style professor, Rainer Molinsky, over at Georgia State. And then the following semester, I encountered some of these left wingers, and I was amazed because I thought, why do you study literature? Why do you go into this field? You love literature.
Right.
Same thing if you were studying history,
That's right.
You want to learn about it. You want to teach about it. You want to pass on the wisdom. But I got these professors, and I soon learned to avoid them, who were just intent on knocking down Western civilization, all the great works that have been written by Shakespeare, Mark Twain. Their goal was deconstruction, and fortunately, back in the 1990s. Some of the old style professors, were still teaching. I mean, they're all gone now. They've retired or they've passed away.
Yeah.
So I was able to do that. And I thought, well, maybe there's a chance I can get a job someplace at a small college, right? If I'm not, stirring things up too much, I can teach, but they'll come get you. And I was canceled. So
Amazing. I really admire you for speaking up, though. I've read some of the stuff you've gone through already, and we need people to speak up. We can't afford to be quiet on these things. I read that when you, during the Obama administration, and you spoke at the Tea Party events, or rallies, whatever you call them, that the IRS went after you for a while there.
Yes. So I decided, I was still teaching, and I decided to start a nonprofit because I was, writing, and I had a number of people following me, and I thought I would start a nonprofit. And I followed all the rules, and this was during the Obama administration. So as you recall, in order to keep the Tea Parties and the conservative groups quiet, they stalled on the applications.
Yeah.
And I was, in that. I got caught up in that. It took 2 years. And I'll tell you, I don't know if you've ever tried to start a nonprofit. People had warned me, but it's not an easy thing to do. The IRS packet, the forms are,
Yeah.
about a half-inch thick. I had to hire an accountant to fill them out. They charged me $850 just to file it. And then I hit a brick wall. And, something that should have taken 3 months took 2 years.
That's amazing.
And they did that to a lot of people.
I remember that.
Yeah. And what they do, though, is, when the government does that, there's very little recourse at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I was part of a class action lawsuit, and I got a very small, settlement. It was something, but it will never make up for the time lost when you've got the momentum going and you're trying to get donations. And so it's a feeling of helplessness. Yeah. Because you can hire an attorney, but you don't know what's going on. I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to call the IRS.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. It's like...
Go ahead.
No, it's like you sit down and you gird yourself, and you say, I'm going to be here for an hour, and maybe it'll get someone, right?
Yeah. Do you ever feel like giving up?
I can't give up. There's something that tells me that I need to keep fighting. Yeah. And there's so many good people out there. I'm going to be at a rally in Charleston next month, Moms for Liberty. I'm going to speak to one of their chapters in Baltimore before that. Nice. And people are concerned, and this is really about the future of the country, because what they're doing in schools is they're abusing kids. The crazy stuff I had to read in graduate school, they're now teaching to second graders, and it's just toxic. It's terrible, and can't sit still and let that happen. Yeah,
I wanted to ask you this. When I was growing up, teachers were real teachers. And they taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, and they respected the parents of the children and the children. And I remember if we were to act up in class or anything, they would even let our parents know about that. And what changed the teachers? Because I can't understand, if a teacher is a real teacher, they love history, they love teaching the history of reading and writing and arithmetic. What changed the teacher to start deceiving the children in this way when the parents are not paying attention?
Well, I think, there are a couple things. The unions are a corrupting force, and also the education schools, like all of academia, became radicalized. So the education that these teachers got was this left-wing Marxist education. And, one of the most popular books that's being used in education schools and colleges of education is Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States.
Yeah.
So that's what the teachers learn, and then they pass it on to the kids.
That's amazing. I want to get to that, but first I want to talk about your organization. You are the executive director of Dissident Pro.com,
Yes.
Prof.com, which stands for Dissident Professors, right?
Correct.
Can you tell us about that real fast here?
Yeah, well, what I do is I post about things that are going on in education. My goal with it was to use it as a forum or a means by which to educate the public about what's going on in education, let people know about what I am seeing in higher education,
Right.
things people don't know about because they would be surprised. I mean, it was just, some people wouldn't believe me when I told them the strange things I would
Yeah,
see.
I know some of the things I've heard I couldn't believe. I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
Amazing. And so tell the folks how to get your organization again so they clearly hear the words, the proper
Okay.
name.
Yeah, so you can subscribe to my email list. I send out a newsletter, and the website is dissidentprof.com. I also have another website, marygrabar.com, Grabar.com, and I post all my articles there, and there are links to buy my books and so forth. But I do have a newsletter at dissidentprof.com. So you can just sign up. I don't share the list. I just send people updates on, what I'm doing, blog posts, things I get published and so forth.
Well, I really want to encourage people to sign up because this is so important. And a lot of people are just not aware how serious this is and how it's being covered up and it's happening even with the parents who are against it. And thank God the parents in Virginia and other places are starting to speak out about it. My producer was telling me, and she's a millennial, right? And she was telling me when she was in high school, they had to read Howard Zinn book. And I had never heard of Howard Zinn. And so you wrote a book called Debunking Howard Zinn, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America. Explain to folks who was Howard Zinn and why was he so significant?
Yeah, well, that's interesting that your producer had to read that. My condolences.
Thank God she held on to her sanity, though.
Yeah,
She
she's
didn't get-
working for you, right?
Yes, that's right. Her parents were pretty conservative too, so that helped a lot.
Yeah. Well, Howard Zinn lures in a lot of young people, even my friends who are very conservative Christians. Their kids, their millennials,
Right.
have been sort of seduced by Howard Zinn. But Howard Zinn died in 2010. He was born in 1922. And he grew up in Brooklyn. His parents were Russian Jewish immigrants. He grew up fairly lower class. But when he was growing up, it was the 1930s, and that was the heyday of communist recruitment. And he got lured in as a teenager. And, in his autobiography, he talks about how he saw that this system was not a fair system. The American system was not fair, and it was not just. And so he started believing in the tenets of Marxism. He actually was a member of the Communist Party from about 1948 to 1953. His FBI file that's close to 500 pages long shows that. Now, I'm relying mostly on an analysis by someone who had been in the Communist Party very briefly.
Yeah.
So, and he said, well, this has all the hallmarks, even though Howard Zinn denied it, his entire life. He had been a member, but he dropped his membership in order to go teach at Spelman College in Atlanta.
Right.
A small Christian school for Black women. And there he set about to radicalizing all of them. One of his students was Alice Walker.
Oh,
Maybe.
yeah, I know who that was.
Yeah.
What a mess.
Yeah. So he went there, he was fired by the college president for insubordination because he was setting the students against the administration.
Wow.
He was not, ostensibly he was taking them on civil rights protests, but he was doing much more than that. He was getting them thrown in jail. He was encouraging them not to go to chapel or follow the dress code or stick to curfew. And so he was fired, but he soon landed on his feet and spent the rest of his career teaching at Boston University, where he then radicalized those students and led protests against the Vietnam War, actually went to Hanoi, colluded with the communist regime there to bring back our POWs, and just spent a lifetime corrupting students, radicalizing them, writing these books and articles that are full of lies, and they remain with us. Howard Zinn's book is still being published. It's still a bestseller.
The book is called A People History of the United States.
Yeah, it's sold over 3 million copies.
The parents are not aware of this book. That's why they're able to get away with it?
Well, yeah, a lot of parents don't know, but think about this. It's been out for 42 years. So a lot of the parents have been educated with Howard Zinn's book. They think it's the truth. A lot of them have not been exposed to anything else. And that's why I wrote my book, because I went through it and I said, and I showed this is not simply a left-wing version of American history, but it's illegitimate. Howard Zinn leaves out parts of quotations. He's very deceptive. So if an author says A, Howard Zinn makes it out to be B because he leaves out those critical words. He misrepresents people. He lies. He just presents misinformation. And presents this rosy picture off in the distance of a socialist regime, and actually encourages violence and violent protest and overthrow of the government.
Two quick things I want to ask you about concerning that. When I was growing up, Black people, and this was before the so-called civil rights movement, Black people were not so easily seduced into communism and hated white folks and blaming others. And I grew up on a plantation in Alabama, and they did have the Jim Crow law, but we knew it was the Democratic Party not wanting Black people, and that all white people did not agree with that. Can you tell me, and so they were not easily seduced, what happened to the Blacks? And it sounded like they were educated and all that, but what happened? How did these people know that they can seduce Black people into socialism or communism? How did they know that? What was it about the Blacks that allowed them to know that?
Well, the Communist Party, since it established, its first office in New York in 1919, has been targeting Black people, and it has been working on starting a civil war between Blacks and whites. And you are correct, because the surveys showed, even though Howard Zinn lies about them, that Black people were always suspicious of communists and of radical left wingers, because they knew from like the Scottsboro case that, the case where the 9 young Black men were charged with raping 2 white women in 1931. The communists wanted to keep those guys in jail. They would have been happy if they'd died in jail because they were raising money. But you have people like Howard Zinn, who in the 60s, probably by orders of, the directors of the Communist Party, went into the classroom. And they don't present this as, okay, now we're going to be like Stalin.
Yeah.
It's going to be, oh, we're going to have social justice. The communists want to end Jim Crow laws. They've always lied about that.
Yeah.
What the communists did, and I've got another book that I've been working on a conservative Black journalist by the name of George Schuyler. He could see this, and he tried to warn the community. He was writing for the Pittsburgh Courier. These people, the communists, are not out for your well-being. They want to see strife. They want to see violence. They wanted them as sort of the shock troops for the Marxist revolution. And that's what Howard Zinn wanted as well. And Howard Zinn, if you read a people's history, you would think from just reading that, that Black people were behind, the Marxists and the socialists, and they were not. It's just a lie.
Right.
And that's what they do. They lie about it. And, Howard Zinn personally, he was a very charming person. The young women at Spelman College were captivated by him. He was tall and good looking. Actually, one of the things that Albert Manley, the college president who fired him, held over his head was a morals charge against Howard Zinn with one of the students from Spelman College. So in the late 50s and the 60s, there was this campaign to go into the Black colleges and to spread Marxism.
Amazing.
So there were white student organizers who went to Howard University. Howard Zinn went to Spelman College, and one by one, they just started changing things.
That's amazing. When I was younger, I heard that the communism had infiltrated the so-called civil rights movement, and that they had become a part of that. And I didn't believe it at first, but now that I'm older and I'm learning more and more how they operate, I believe that now, that was possible. And also, I saw a documentary once about how some of the unions got started. And what they did was, during the civil rights movement, according to the documentary, they looked for the angry people, the people who were complaining they had about the system and all that. And a lot of Black people at that time, and still are, were angry and complaining. And so the unions recruited them because they was complainers. And that's how at least some of the unions got started, by bringing in the angry people. You find that to be true?
Yeah, I mean, for the research I've done on the Howard Zinn book and my George Schuyler biography, I mean, George Schuyler, he wrote this column about the Watts riots. He blamed the white socialist beatniks. He remember that term, beatniks?
Yeah.
That's from the 1950s. You know who was behind the Newark riots?
Who's that?
Tom Hayden.
And who was Tom Hayden?
He was a member of the SDS, the Students for a Democratic Society. He was a leader, this 1960s radical group, mostly made up of, white college kids. Tom Hayden went down into Newark and he started stirring up trouble.
Amazing.
No, there's this whole history that has been suppressed. And of course, the historians that are now writing the books, they've been taught by these people.
Yeah.
And so there's this worshipfulness of the communists, and they wanted the rioting, they wanted violence. They didn't care about civil rights. They cared about overthrowing the government. Civil rights was just a pretense.
Yeah.
You want to change the system, and Howard Zinn said this. He talked about using the equal access under the Civil Rights Act. He saw that as a great thing, not because everyone was able to go where they wanted to a restaurant or a hotel as they should, but because it would redefine private property. He didn't like the idea of private property.
Amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It's
so amazing. Let me ask, are you aware or not, are you aware if Martin Luther King Jr. and the so-called civil rights leaders, did they know that this so-called movement was infiltrated by communism, and did they support that idea?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a very tricky subject. The Stanley Levison, I don't know if you've heard that name.
I may have, I don't remember.
Yeah, he was the guy who financed what Martin Luther King Jr. was doing. And King was warned by the Kennedy administration and to cut ties with Stanley Levison and a few other people. King lied about that. He did not cut ties. Stanley Levison said he had been a member of the Communist Party, but no longer was. However, it's now come out, I think David Garrow has written about this, he's a historian, that Levison remained in the Communist Party. So there were these people around King who were manipulating him. And, unfortunately, he got caught up in that, and these were not good people who were around him. And Stanley Levison certainly was not. His main goal was not equal rights. It was something much bigger. It was anti-American, and I think the movement went off the tracks. And of course, after the 1963 March on Washington, if you remember, King started becoming more radical.
Yeah.
He started speaking out against the Vietnam War.
Right.
And, on the side of the North Vietnamese, right? I mean, just sounding very much like a communist. And his last effort was organizing the janitors. Was it in Memphis? I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was really not a civil rights activity.
Yeah.
To me, civil rights is you have equal opportunity. You adhere to what he said in that speech, which is a favorite. That you're judged by the content of your character.
I think he was joking about that too.
Yeah. There's so much out there. I mean, Cornel West.
He is a mess.
But he likes King. He likes the radical King, and
Yeah.
he wrote a book about that. And as you may know, Nicole Hannah-Jones, the creator of the 1619 Project, in her talk at this club in Chicago, just amazed everyone because she started quoting King's speeches. But of course, the media pretends that she has discovered something new, which is not the case.
No, it's not. I want to get to that, and time is moving. So let me ask, I have so many things I want to know from you. I grew up, when I moved away from Alabama. Oh, let me tell you this. When the whole civil rights movement started, I was younger, of course, and I remember the older black people were not for it. They didn't agree with King. And they were called names and occatoms and things like that. But the older black people were speaking out against the movement, so-called movement, because I guess they could understand what was going on and that it wasn't really what they said that it was. But those people were criticized and occatoms, and those people were not that educated either. They worked the farms and They knew what was going on. So I really realized now that they were being attacked for telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean, there was a survey that was done, in the mid 60s that showed 51% of Black people opposed King.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that he was doing was he was recruiting little children into these protests.
Wow. Now I'm
Right?
thinking that King went up to the mountaintop and he looked over and he saw communism in America. He didn't see the glory of the coming of the Lord. He saw communism. But what I want to ask you is that I'm surprised how many Jewish people are so liberal, and I'm surprised that they are like a part of a communist movement, because what I've heard about them and read about them, they went through hell, not supposedly, but they were like put on trains and they were murdered and killed and raped. They were taken away from their families. And if they have gone through all those types of pain, why would they want to be anywhere near liberalism or socialism or communism? Why would any Jewish person promote that?
I don't know. My Jewish friends wonder about the same thing.
Yeah.
They're conservative. Some of them, a couple of them have, after Donald Trump was elected, have sort of fallen off the wagon, but it doesn't make sense.
No.
I don't know. I mean, it's sort of like someone coming from a communist country and then saying, "Oh, well, let's have it here."
Yeah, exactly. That's mind-blowing to me. I would love to understand what is going on in their minds that they would support communism and socialism in a free country. It just doesn't make sense. But I got to ask you about Howard Zinn. You debunked Howard Zinn's description about Christopher Columbus. What was his opinion of Christopher Columbus?
Well, he lied about Christopher Columbus. And the reason was because, Christopher Columbus discovered America.
Yeah.
And he truly was a great man. He had vision, he had intelligence, he had courage, he had devotion to God, he had faith. And he respected the natives. It was his men, who abused them.
Yeah.
When Columbus was away, he actually had some of them hanged for abusing the natives. But what Howard Zinn is doing is promoting the communist propaganda, because, so Howard Zinn's not innovative in this. The communist line has been that Columbus was a capitalist, and because he was a greedy capitalist, he decided to enslave the natives, rape the women, force them to look for gold. And when they didn't, chopped off their hands. But what's behind all that is capitalism. Capitalism is the big evil to communists.
Yeah.
And so there are all these lies about Columbus that I kind of pick apart in my book and expose, and I show where Howard Zinn is leaving out critical words. He plagiarized. He claims he did all this research and read all of Columbus's journals, but what he really did was he copied from a socialist buddy of his in the anti-Vietnam War movement, who was not a historian. He was a journalist and a novelist. So it's all made up stuff. It's all distorted stuff. And when you think about it, here is the discoverer. So if you want to knock down America, you start at its discovery. You start right at the beginning. And that's, exactly what Howard Zinn did, as all communists did.
Yeah. Was Christopher Columbus a Christian?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He was trying to, find a path to the Khan and, eliminate, and to bring Christianity to the world. I mean, he wanted to convert the natives. He wanted to save their souls. I mean,
That's right.
I think that's a good thing to want to do.
Absolutely. And now in my country here in America, as you know already, they want to change Christopher Columbus Day to Indian People Day. What a mess, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's Indigenous Peoples Day, right? If you read about the 500 tribes that were here before the Europeans arrived, they weren't these peace-loving hippies that Howard Zinn makes them out to be. They were territorial wars. The women were treated as like beasts of burden. They were the ones, growing the corn, hoeing with a stick in the ground while the men were lolling around or hunting. There was constant warfare over territory. There was torture. There was enslavement. They enslaved the people they captured, as everyone did around the world.
Yeah.
So, I don't know why we, would want to have that kind of a holiday. I'm not saying that.
I don't want it.
I mean, Europeans did some horrible things too, especially in wartime. But why? The reason the people who are behind Indigenous Peoples Day present a completely distorted picture of what,
when I read that, it reminded me of what I hear the blacks saying about Africa. And they were saying that, the white people went over to Africa and they enslaved the blacks and brought them to this country and other countries and enslaved them. But that's not true. They act like the blacks was over in Africa tiptoeing through the tulips. And all of a sudden, the white man came and just took them. But what they're leaving out is that blacks were enslaved by other blacks. Tribes were fighting against tribes. Black people were being sold. When they wanted to buy merchandise in Africa, they would use black people as money. Other black people were using black people. All those things are left out. And it reminded me of how the Indians were doing this over here, but all that is left out. And it's amazing to see that. I want to ask you about the Black Panther Party. They were looked at as a civil rights leader group, right? But they were not civil rights.
No, they're a radical Marxist organization. They were violent. They, tortured people. You had Angela Davis in it, who was a bona fide member of the Communist Party.
Yeah.
She's proud of it. She's invited to give Martin Luther King Day talks. She's a celebrity, makes a lot of money. The Black Panthers, they were terrorists. They were not civil rights leaders. And unfortunately, I'm seeing these lessons being pushed into schools by the Zinn Education Project that presents the Black Panthers as civil rights leaders, but they definitely were not.
Amazing. Tell us about the 1619 Project. What is that, and why is that so important to the socialists now? And is that being taught in the schools?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's why you've got all these states that are writing and passing legislation against it. We were speaking about, enslavement in Africa. The 1619 Project, the reason that this is 1619 is that's when the first Africans were brought here to Virginia. But Nicole Hannah-Jones, the creator of that project, knows that there was enslavement in Africa, but she leaves that out.
Yeah.
And so she says basically that the Europeans went into Africa and kidnapped.
Well, it's amazing to hear that, knowing that it's not true at all.
It's not. I mean, the Portuguese tried it. They were just eliminated. They could not do it, you know. It was impossible. So that's the lie that is being spread. It's intended to make all white people look evil.
Yeah.
And all, you know, all Black people in America as, you know, being descended from slaves. I mean, that's not true.
Nope.
There were some, you know, Black slave owners themselves, and I go into cases of that. So it's if you read it, you can see it's this grossly distorted history, but it sets Black against white in this false history. It's intended to stir up bad feelings among children because it's being taught K through 12. The lessons were pushed out as soon as that magazine was published in 2019. And teachers started teaching it. It had no vetting. There was no process to review it. It was just there.
What is it like for you? And then I got to put you on the hot seat. What is it like for you? What is it like for you seeing white people, white Americans, not just white folks in America, but around the world in the European countries? What is it like for you seeing white people being accused for everything, every downfall, and then outwardly discriminating against the whites, passing laws against whites, and it seemed that it can't be stopped? What is it like for you seeing that?
Well, I'll tell you, it's scary. I'm up here in New York State. They're rationing healthcare. I never thought I would see the day. So if you need treatment for COVID, you know, one of the criteria is your race. Yeah. Well, if you've got, you know, this 18-year-old Black male athlete who's in the prime of his life, and he gets preference over someone who, you know, maybe a white person who's older and hasn't, you know, a couple issues. I mean, that's really scary. Yeah. It's, you know, I never thought I would see the day where it would come down to medicine. I mean, academia is one thing, and you can say, okay, well, you know, English departments, history departments, but it's frightening, and it makes you think about, you know, well, where can you go? What state can you go to where you won't get this discrimination? And it's coming from the Biden administration. So some of the states are following his directives, and it's you know, it's really frightening. And to think, you know, I think, you know, Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is the creator of the 1619 Project, now she has a white mother.
What? No.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew this.
No, I did not.
Yeah, but I really think she has this visceral hatred of white people. Yeah. You know, she mocked this idea of rationing of healthcare on Twitter recently. She said, "Oh, this, you know, these people who complain about it are fascists." Oh, well, I'm sorry, no. You know, you're not a fascist for insisting that, you know, you be treated equally when you go to a hospital or a doctor's office. I mean, it's horrible.
It's insane. Why, in short, why don't white people protest and march and speak out and say no to all these things? Because as long as they are quiet about it, it's just going to get worse. It's not going to get better. Yeah,
well, Shelby Steele has, you know, a good book called White Guilt, right? And I think it's, you know, you're called a racist immediately if you say anything. If you complain about affirmative action, or if you complain about rationing of healthcare, you're a racist because you're supposed to, you know, you
but
have.
Why do they care about the name calling? I can care less about name calling.
Well, a lot of white people are intimidated, and you know, I think there's a civil war among white people.
Among white people, white on white?
Yes.
Really? What do you mean by that?
There are the white elites who are in academia or who are in high-tech businesses, and they want to prove themselves to be superior to the middle-class white people.
Oh,
And they side with these laws. Well, you think about it, okay?
yeah.
So the average white person, like myself, who's walking around, I want to know, that the police will be there.
Yes.
Oh,
That's for sure.
right? I don't have money for private security. I don't live in a place where I have a fancy security system.
Yeah.
I can't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the doctor of my choice. Those kinds of discriminatory laws affect me, but the rich whites, it doesn't affect them. In fact, they benefit from it.
Yes.
They are the ones who will get recognition and adulation for it. And so there is this conflict, but I can't tell you what it's like. If you do complain about it, it's crazy. I remember in graduate school, we had the Rodney King riots. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
What a mess. I remember.
Yeah. And I remember Professor telling the class, he said, a Black person can never hurt a white person. And you may recall that white truck driver got beat up. He almost died.
Reginald Denny, I believe his name was.
Yes, exactly. Of course, white people can get hurt. We're not gods.
I know. We are so out of time, but I got to ask you, what do you suggest to parents that are still putting their children in these socialist governmental schools? What should they do with their children at this point?
Yeah, well, I would say keep a very, very, very close eye, become very active. If you cannot do that, pull your kids out and, homeschool them. But even private schools are doing this crazy critical race theory and teaching Howard Zinn, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's important for all citizens to care about the schools, because if you remember from the summer of 2020, all those crazy people, they were Black and white, out on the streets, looting, tearing down statues, attacking people. That's a result of the education that they have been given. So,
So homeschool is the best way to go at this point, huh?
If you can do it. But I think we should all be concerned about what's being taught, because those people are going to be on the street. They're going to be turning over your table when you're trying to have a meal at a restaurant. They're going to be blocking the road. They're going to be tearing down a statue of, Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. These people are out of control. They're violent. And they're dangerous. And
then they're going to put up a statue of an unemployed drug addict with a criminal record called George Floyd.
Don't get me started on that. That'll be another conversation.
I got to put you on the hot seat. I got to heat this interview up, and put my guests on the hot seat. I need you to answer these questions as quickly as possible, all right?
The hot seat.
Who has more privilege, Black people or gay people?
People who are Black and gay.
Should Roe versus Wade be overturned?
Yes.
What is love?
I don't know.
What is a man?
I don't want to name the parts here. I'll blush.
No, except for the parts, other than the part.
A man has the chromosomes that make you a man. He has the male chromosomes.
What is a woman?
The same thing. She has the chromosomes that make her a woman.
In one word, describe Joe Biden.
Senile.
Does rape culture exist?
I don't know.
Is white privilege real?
No.
Should China pay reparation for damage from the Chinese virus?
Absolutely.
True or false? Straight, white, Christian men are the most hated species on this side of heaven.
True.
True. Thank you so much for sitting in the hot seat there. That was fun, huh?
It sure was. I'm glad to have been invited.
So did you have fun?
I did.
Thank you so much. Tell the folks how to get your books, how can they get to your organization, everything you're doing, because they need to know about this. This is so important, and it's so clear. You make it so clear. Even I, being black and slow, I understand it. Tell the folks how to get it.
Well, again, dissidentprof.com or marygrabar.com. And if you want to order my book, Debunking the 1619 Project, your children may be being taught that in school. Regnery, my publisher, has a special offer now, $10 off. So go to regnery.com, regnery.com, and there's a code word and you'll get $10 off. Spread the word. I hope people will get it into schools and libraries so that kids at least have an alternative book to use if they are being forced to read the 1619 Project.
Absolutely. Dr. Mary Grabar, thank you so much for coming on. I really, I knew it would be enlightening for me, and it was, the discussion, so thank you for that. And thank you folks for tuning in. I absolutely appreciate it. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, check out Patreon on the link there, description link, and also check out our store. We have amazing merch in the Fallen State store there, so check that out. And thank you for your support, folks. Let me hear from you. Have a good one. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Next time on The Fallen State.
A research specialist in ancient Egyptian history.
The Nile Valley movement was born out of a concern of maintaining and perpetuating, advancing, and preserving a black image of Nile Valley civilization.
Why aren't blacks doing better if they're so smart?
Well,
Uh-huh.
hold on one second. This is not an aha moment. I think it's not just any one thing.
What's the primary thing?
Uh-huh. It's not one way. It's a mutual dislike and hatred. It certainly is.
No, it's not. It's really not.
No one on either side is prepared to have a real conversation.
White people want to have a real conversation.
Hold on.
Thanks for watching The Fallen State. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. Support my nonprofit at rebuildingtheman.com and tell everybody and their mama about the show. Amazing. Dr. Grabar, that was so much fun, but yet so educational for me. I do appreciate it.
Well, you're a great interviewer. I had a great time.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Be safe out there, all right?
I will. Thank you. You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. you.